Welcome to another episode of the podcast. On this episode, I'm super duper honored to be joined by Alfie, better known as Technikore and Technikal. How you going, man? How's your week been?
Good. Not too bad. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, thank you for being on, man. You been busy this week in the studio or?
Yeah, I had a couple of clients yesterday working on some prog house bits. Prog house on Thursday, prog house on Friday. You would never expect that to be the case from myself, doing so much hard music. But yeah, most of my clients are not in the hard music world. So.
Yeah. So that's where the money must be at, hey?
Well, kind of. Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. Fair enough, dude. Cool. So I'm moving on with the show. As we all know, the first thing I want to ask you is your origin story. So I would like to know, how did you personally get into music? About when? Tell us about the age, what was going on in your life at the time, and also tell us a bit about Technikal and Technikal. How did that start up? So if you personally first, man, let us know.
So, yeah, I've always been into music as a kid, not necessarily into any specific genre, but I remember when I was about 10, I've got two older half-brothers, and one of them at the time, they're I think they're like 15 years older than me, and he'd just bought himself a pair of decks, and he'd started playing what I classed at the time as club music. Didn't really know an awful lot about what it was, but he gave me one of his mixtapes one time, and I was only about 10 years old, and gave it to me, and it was one of those things I listened to once. I thought, it's very noisy. I never listened to it again, and went back to listening to my Michael Jackson or whatever I was listening to at that age.
Yeah.
And then I remember I started doing a paper round when I was about 13, delivering papers early morning, and I picked up my Walkman, and I accidentally picked up this tape instead of whatever else it was I was looking for. And I ended up having to do this paper round with my older brother's 3-year-old dance music tape. Little did I know that my taste had naturally developed at this point, and it was filled with just absolute early trance classics, and I'd never heard them before, but that was my introduction to trance music at the time, and basically kick-started a lifelong obsession and love with melodic dance music.
Cool. So how old were you about that time?
This was when I was about 13 when I first started doing a paper round.
Oh, wow,
So,
yeah, right.
Yeah,
and then, what year was that, roughly?
That would have been about 98, 97.
Wow, yeah, cool.
Oh, no, I think, 98 if my maths in my head works out, yeah.
Sweet. Awesome.
But, I mean, it all snowballed from there, because then I started looking up, other ways to consume this music. There was a big radio DJ at the time in the UK. There's a Radio 1 station, which is famous around the world, but there was a DJ called Judge Jules, which anyone my age will certainly know the name, but he basically championed that sound, and it was my Friday night ritual, was listening to Judge Jules, recording it, checking the track lists online on the earlier days of the internet, and finding out what these songs were. Yeah, the whole, it was just a very, very, for me, it's just a very special time when I look back, because I think music was such a, there was so much mystique to it back then for me as a kid. It was this other world that, it was so inaccessible. So obviously, as you grow up and get more and more into the scene, you realise that it's certainly not, and it's a lot smaller operation than you first think.
Mm-hmm.
So
on that note, don't you do you find it really interesting, engaging? Sometimes you'll stumble upon a random mix, but the mix won't have a track list. So you just have to listen to it, and then it kind of, I feel like, almost engages you a bit more.
Yeah, true. But that was certainly how it was back in those days. I mean, I find it frustrating now, because you're everybody's so used to having access to information and needing to know what something is, and then they move on instantly to consume the next thing.
Yeah.
I think there was a bit of romance in not knowing what these tracks were. In fact, funny story, there was one track from one of these Judge Jules sets back in the day, and I remember me and my friend in maths, there was one song, we would sit there in maths with one ear each with the Walkman, and we never found out what this track was called. And there was a little, how they do have the radio jingles in between, or they'll say like a catchphrase or something.
Yeah.
And I remember Judge Jules at this point of the track said, delivering you fresh, meaty chunks of dance music every Friday. And so we referred to this track as Meaty Chunks. That was what we called it. And it was only a few years ago, and I got a random Facebook off this mate that I used to sit next to in maths. We hadn't spoken in about 15 years. And he messaged and said, mate, I found it. I found Meaty Chunks. And he'd found a white label with the track. And it was, he had the track name and everything. And it was just so crazy for that to come full circle. But yeah, that just wouldn't happen now, would it? Just certainly wouldn't.
No, that's it. Odds are you'll find it on SoundCloud, or you use Shazam or something like that to find it for you. Hey?
That's it.
Cool. Awesome, dude. Great stories. Now, origin story about Technikal and Technikore. What came first, and how did they come about?
Well, maybe I should give you a little insight into my music production background, because I mean, obviously I've spoken about how I got into the music, but I was always a bit of a nerdy kid, believe it or not, as most producers were. And for me, it became more of an obsession of knowing how this music was made, as opposed to just consuming it and enjoying it. I wanted to know why, and the hows and the whys. And there was a very early way into music for someone my age. There was a program called Music on the PlayStation. It was just a PlayStation game, and I remember spending a lot of time on that, and that developed my interests in music production side of things. I then seeked out slightly more advanced software, moved on to PC, and it was the very early days of FL Studio. It was called Fruity Loops back then, version 4. I'm sure people on 20 now wouldn't even recognize it anymore. It was very primitive by today's standards, but it was enough. It was all you needed to make a track on your PC. And the only alternative at the time was studios filled with expensive hardware, and that was just inaccessible to a kid my age of 13, 14 years old. So pushed on with the music, and just had a bit of a knack for it. It did become an obsession for a couple of years, and definitely ignored more schoolwork and college work than I should have done, and ended up dropping out of college because of spending too much time on the music. But I'd like to think it sort of paid off in the end.
Worth it.
But yeah, that's it. So the Technikal project was my hard trance and hard house sounding stuff. Originally, Technikal, the name didn't exist. My first demos that I sent off to the first record labels that signed me, I was just using my name, Alfie Bamford. Everything was just under the name Alfie Bamford. And my very first record signing was to a label it was actually a distributor in London called Alpha Magic, and they owned about 50 labels.
Wow.
So what they'd do is they would take on new artists, and then they would find which label out of their roster, would suit the artist. So I got put onto a label called Execute and Mohawk. They were quite small labels at the time, but for a kid, it was very exciting to have your vinyls pressed and stuff.
Start somewhere.
That's exactly right. And I remember he called me and he said, before they were about to do the artwork for the first release, and he said, I want you to have a think about your name, because he said, no offence, obviously Alf Bamford's your name, but we just don't think it's got any star quality to it. So, when people are rifling through the 12 inches in HMV or whatever record shop they're at, we don't feel like Alf Bamford's going to stand out. And I remember at the time thinking, oh, really? Loads of people just use their name, but fair enough. He said, the only thing is you've got 24 hours to come up with something, because we need to get the artwork done by tomorrow. So get your thinking cap on and give me a call tomorrow and see what you come up with. So I said, okay, cool. So I started thinking, and that evening I actually ended up going online and having an online game of Command & Conquer Generals.
Nice. And
I was playing my mate at the time, and it's a military game with lots of little military units. And one of the units, it was like what they called like a Jeep with a machine gun on the back, and it was called a Technikal, spelled obviously the correct way.
Right.
And obviously I switched out one of the C's for a K, because that's cool.
That's hard.
And that was the history. That was it. There's no real crazy story other than that. It was as simple as that. And I thought, hey, that works. It looks good written down. The name Technikore came much later, when I got into the happy hardcore side of things. It was actually my now wife, my girlfriend at the time. She got me into the hardcore stuff.
Oh, nice.
And that's another story. We'll probably get onto that in another part. But yeah, Technikore actually came from my wife. She said it as a joke. She said, "Why don't you just call yourself Technikore?" I said, "I love it." She said, "I was only joking." I said, "No, I love it," and that was it. And it stayed.
Wow, that's brilliant.
But it's kind of cool to have a name that I guess people know that you're the same guy, but it's a different alias, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And that also leads into another discussion. Every episode I ask pretty much every guest, do you find that it's more appropriate to release different styles on different names? Or would you prefer to release everything under one name? But with your names, they are so similar that it's a lot more obvious to people. So that kind of helps people, if someone's got a completely different name, of course, they might have a harder time to find their other alias.
I have battled with this, a lot for the past few years, especially being that Technikal has gone more down the hardstyle sound, and the happy hardcore stuff sounds more hardstyle than it used to. There's such a close link. I have battled with it, thinking, do I just use one name or whatnot? But I think nowadays it's less important for artists to have to segregate styles. I think nowadays, if a new exciting artist, no one cares if one track's 128 BPM and the next one's 160. As long as there's a consistent quality, I think that's all that matters, and a consistent identity between the BPM doesn't necessarily dictate a style, I don't think.
Yeah, fair enough.
back in the day, people just used to have aliases for the sake of it. I had so many more. I think I've had about 20 all up.
Wow.
It was like, oh, this track sounds a little bit different. Let's have a new name for it. Whereas nowadays, it doesn't make any sense because people build their Spotify profiles under, one artist. They build their followers. You don't want to have a separate identity and have to start again every time,
Yeah.
Imagine how much the SoundCloud subscriptions are not costing for all of those.
Yeah, one for every
Jesus.
account.
Yeah,
that's so true. That's funny.
So yeah, I think it's less important nowadays. I think there's less pigeonholing nowadays anyway. Maybe, I don't know. That's how it seems from my perspective.
Yeah, no, I feel even names are less important and whatnot, and I feel like people are getting a little bit more open-minded about things, which is always good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, back onto Technikal. So that wasn't originally hardstyle. That was hard trance. Am I correct?
Yeah, I mean, when I think of Technikal now, if I was think of the music that sums up Technikal, it's called UK hard trance essentially. It did enjoy a small lifespan here in Australia between like 2005 to 2010 kind of time, and then just sort of the hardstyle side of things just took over. But yeah, it's a very UK oriented sound. I was under the impression when I moved over here 5 years ago that I'd be able to bring the sound here and introduce people to it, but it didn't quite work out. And the hardstyle stuff, it's got into me, and I didn't expect to. I didn't expect it to take to it like I have done, but I actually really like it. I think you hear so much of it when you're in Sydney anyway. You start to identify certain parts that you like, and you adapt into your own sound. So. But it started off as UK hard trance, and it's just evolved over time. I don't know what Technikal is anymore. It's whatever I released this week.
Oh, that's cool. At least you're comfortable with that.
That's
you know
it,
what I mean?
yeah.
And I think that's probably the main thing, the most important thing. Hey?
Yeah.
Now, why did you move to Australia, if you don't mind me asking? So you were actually, how long ago has it been since you've moved here now?
It's nearly 5 years now.
5 years now. And what brought about that move?
So my wife's Australian.
Right.
So she, we met here in a club back in 2004, just complete random meeting, and she was moving to the UK, happened to be going for a working holiday. She moved over and was only supposed to be over there for 6 months, but we got together and she was still there 10 years later.
Oh, nice.
Dual citizenship, see. So, but 10 years down the track, and it was time to move back. It was. I'd always said that it was on the cards. It's an amazing country. The time just felt right to come over, and I've got good friends here, friends like Steve Hill and those guys who looked after me when I first got here. JTS, we set up our label straight away when I came over. So. Yeah, it's been good. It's been really good. It feels like home now. It has done for a couple of years. So
Australia's now your new home. You're not missing...
for sure. I mean, of course I miss the UK. Hey, listen, it's nice to have two countries where you can go and you feel like you're at home.
Yeah,
it's just a shame they're so fucking far away.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Travel
so
time.
You miss family and you miss friends, but the great thing is, the world's a much smaller place with technology these days.
Very true.
So, I speak to my mum quite often still, and it's like she's still in my living room. So. It's no biggie.
Do you miss the crowds over there? Which, if you don't mind me asking, which crowd do you kind of prefer?
It's just different. It's changed a lot over there though, because I'll go back to the UK and it doesn't necessarily feel how it did when I used to live there. It's the club scene changes a lot in 5 years. It's a different place. It's a completely different style of crowd anyway. The type of clubs I play there to here are different. They're mainly hardstyle clubs here, with an acceptance for happy hardcore. That's kind of, that's how it goes in Australia.
Yeah.
Whereas the UK hardcore crowds, I mean, yeah, it's very MC oriented in the UK. The MC is, pretty much the star of the show on the stage, and it's a different energy in the crowd for sure. Hey, I love both. I do love both. I've got to say that. Hey, that's the diplomatic sitting on the fence. That's a boring answer.
Yeah, cool. No, that's fair enough, dude. Would you say that the Sydney audience is a little bit more towards the harder, like, raw spectrum, and the UK audience is a bit more to, like, punchy kicks and, like, reverse bass, or...?
There's just... hardstyle's just never really been a huge thing in the UK.
Right. That's interesting.
Yeah, it has had, like, a fairly decent life in Wales, but actually in mainland England, it's never really caught on. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are events, but it's not the huge entity that it is here in Australia.
Right,
so,
that's cool.
that was quite surprising for me, and that was why I hadn't been exposed to too much of it. So, yeah, I mean, put it this way: coming here and getting used to the sounds of hardstyle. Before I moved over, I remember hearing Headhunters, Dragonborn, and like I considered that like terrorcore. To me at the time, I just didn't understand that music. To me, it was like, that is hard. And now, it's, there's harder.
Yeah, totally. What do you think of, how do you feel about Sefa 200 BPM kind of French?
I love what he does. I love what he does. Obviously, it's not something I play or would make, but I have so much respect for that guy and his talent.
Yeah.
That's the thing, I think.
And you appreciate those spectrums.
Absolutely. You can see, though, even if something is, even some of this, super hard raw stuff that necessarily isn't for me, the work that goes into that, and the art of the craft, and the
passion as well.
But the ability and the technical side of like writing that music is just ridiculous. So have utmost respect for it. I couldn't and I wouldn't do it, but utmost respect to him.
Yeah, fair enough. Cool. Moving on with the show, I'm going to start asking you some questions.
Yeah,
We've got a lot of questions this episode.
Oh, okay.
So we're going to do our best to smash through all of them. Apologize to anyone whose question we've left out though. So first one comes from Chris via Instagram, and he's curious about melody writing. So he wants to know, do you have any tips and tricks for melody writing?
It's a tough one because I've never had any music theory training myself. It's just been something.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's just something. The music side, it just kind of came naturally. I'm not trying to sound big-headed or anything. It's just one of those things that I've never really struggled with that side of things. So whenever I've been trying to give advice for this stuff, it's like, we just make the notes sound good. And that's not very helpful.
No, that's cool. So would you recommend then you use your ears? Like if it sounds good to you?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think over time, just the more you do of something, even without any training, you're obviously going to get better at it and develop an ear for things that something that sounded right to you 2 years ago, you might listen to now and say, oh yeah, that's a bit off. And you can't tell yourself why that's the case, but it's just a development of your ear. Honestly, the best thing to do would be to study some music theory. If it's not coming to you naturally, I would honestly advise doing that, because I could get an awful lot out of doing that myself if I had the time to invest in it. That's a really, really terrible answer, isn't it?
No, that's great. So you never, just to clarify, you never touch the keyboard or a piano growing up?
I have a keyboard set up, and I'll sit there and jam it with my fat fingers and get the wrong notes every time.
Oh, okay.
But it's more, that keyboard sits on my desk for me to audition sounds.
Yeah, no,
that sounds nice. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. I guess, the best tip from that would be, just use your ears, hey?
Use your ears, and also don't be afraid of just doing stuff on the piano roll, because that's, if you're just doing it on the screen, there's nothing wrong with that.
Awesome, cool. Second question, Instagram from Kayleen Scar, Vegemite or Marmite?
I don't mind either, but I'm going to come in with a bit of a curveball and say Bovril. I know it's supposed to be a stock, and it's supposed to be enjoyed as a winter warmer drink. Spread it on your toast, it's the nuts.
Yeah, right.
It's wicked.
Okay, I'm not going to lie, I've got no clue. Is that very similar? Or
It's like, they sell it over here, it's like liquid. So it comes in the same kind of jar as like a jar of Marmite.
Right,
but it's more syrupy. So you put the knife in and it drizzles off the... but it's very dark as well.
Right.
It's a bit richer. My dad used to have it on his, and when I used to go and stay at his, and I developed a taste for it there.
Has it got that bitterness to it? That Vegemite?
No, it doesn't. No. It's not. It's just meaty.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a real man's version. I don't know why I have
it. Fair enough. No, that's all good. Alrighty. Next question from Facebook. This one is from Kyle Nurse, better known as MKN.
Oh, hello.
What's the biggest thing you've learned as a producer?
Biggest as in volume size, or?
I'm going to say maybe what's the most important thing, or maybe the most valuable thing that you...
Just don't be afraid to get your work critiqued and blasted by someone that you look up to and knows better, and don't ignore it. For years and years and years, I used to get sound advice from Gamma. He used to always say, there was always, he would give me my critique. This is going back sort of 5-6 years ago. Something's not quite right. And me and my arrogance was like, nah, he's just not hearing it right. He's not hearing it right. And now I listen back and I was like, oh my God, if only I'd listened to him sooner, I could have learnt sooner. So, honestly, if you're sending stuff to people for critique, don't be afraid to take it on board. Don't be too proud.
Yeah, fair enough. That's really good advice. You know what? Bringing on that discussion a little bit forward, what would you say to people that struggle to get noticed or a reply from people? Would you say, don't be shy to send a second message? Would you say, try and find someone else?
Just keep trying with a huge amount of people. Rather than annoy the same person, I think eventually it does get to a point where you get so disheartened and you think, well, fuck you then. And there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I experienced that even now still with certain labels, and it gets to the point where you're like, right, okay, well, I'll send it to someone who is going to check it out. And that, you know, there's going to be someone there that's going to
Yeah.
give you the feedback that you want, and there's going to be someone that listens to it. But don't spread your don't spread yourself too thinly, I guess. Just
That's interesting. Yeah, really cool. On that note as well, do you feel that we really need labels as much as we used to? Or do you feel like if someone wanted to, they could go down maybe a more independent path?
there's certainly room for that these days, isn't there? There really is. I don't think you necessarily need a label to get out there. I think a label can offer things that you can't get independently. I think there are obviously the fact that there's an established customer base of people that are going to check out something from the label regardless of who it's by. You've obviously got potential playlist support on platforms like Spotify that you're not going to get independently unless you obviously put a lot of groundwork in yourself. It's tough. It is tough. It's a
Maybe like pros and cons of both, hey?
yeah, they really are. I mean, there's a reason though why. I mean, we run our own label, OneSeventy, myself and James, and I also release quite regularly on Electric Fox. So it's
Awesome.
You know, I know that there's obviously advantages to releasing with Electric Fox. They have a completely different market, more of a European market. They can get it out to the more hardstyle crowd, whereas we've got our die-hard, happy hard side of things. So it all depends on what the track is and kind of what where you want to pitch it to, I guess.
Yeah, fair enough.
So yeah, I guess you can do it on a case-by-case basis. Maybe it's one track might suit an independent release, and one, you know, if a label's biting your arm off to sign it, then that's no bad thing either.
Yeah.
So-
Fair enough. Cool. On that note, the next question is from Stephen Stave.
Oh yeah.
How many labels do you run, or do you co-run?
These days, well, so I've got 170 with James. That's the primary one, and I think that's it, isn't it? Really?
So just the one?
Well, I mean, actively, yeah. I have have another hardcore label, Supersonic, but that used to be my main label. But I tend to just use it now. If there's something that doesn't fit on 170, I'll just push it out on Supersonic.
Yeah, that's
so
cool.
It's good to have another angle.
Yeah, totally. So moving on to the next question. This one's from Robert Dyson. And in 2013, you worked with a singer or vocalist, Example. Is that correct?
Yeah, he was a British pop star Example. Yeah.
Awesome. And the question from Robert Dyson is, did you spend much, if any, time with him? And what is he like as a person?
Yeah, so I co-produced quite a lot of his album Live Life Living. We actually, the very first time we worked together, he came to my studio, he came to my house at the time. In fact, there is a funny story attached to that, because we got the phone call from him, and we'd been put in contact with him. It was all kind of organised through Steve Hill, who works at Massive here, or runs Massive, sorry. So the kind of setup was made. He called me and asked to come around and start work on a track. So he turned up at my house, but I was literally right in the middle of house moving. So it was the last thing I'd packed up was my studio, but the entire rest of the house was bare and in storage.
Wow.
So he turned up and knocked on the door, and because I was obviously a little bit starstruck, a bit nervous about this, celeb turning up at my house, I was too nervous to actually explain why the whole house was completely bare. I don't know what was going through his head, but he was very weirded out, because he'd said, he goes, I've actually only got about half an hour to work on this, mate. And then I'm going to have to shoot off to go to a meeting. And I'm just thinking, well, I'm not going to get a lot done in half an hour, but I'll get my skates on and work as quickly as I can. Anyway, 3 hours into the session, I said, have you not got to disappear? And I think the track was going so well, he was more than happy to stay around. And he said, just a question, is like, why have you got nothing in your house downstairs? And it just clicked. I was like, well, you must have thought I'd rented a house for some sort of like murder thing or something. It's like, Jesus, what an elaborate way to knock someone off the face of the earth.
Maybe he saw it as a compliment. He's like, this guy has rented out a whole house just for me.
Yeah.
Like,
oh, mate, I could have picked
no expense.
Could have picked a nicer house.
Fair enough. That's hilarious.
So what's he like as a person? Yeah, he's great. He's cool. He lives the high life, but he was a lovely guy. He looked after me, very down to earth. Just a proper lad.
Awesome,
Good fun. Good fun, yeah.
On to the next question from Evan Dorian. Are hot dog sandwiches?
I'm definitely the man to put that question to, eh? No, definitely not. It's hot dog.
Yeah, I agree, man.
Is there any debate? Has that ever been a question? I'd never heard that as a question before.
All right, this one is going to get even wackier. This one is from Max Mix Mozart. What do you put on your cornflakes to make your melodies so fresh? Can I buy it in the UK? If not, can you send me some, please?
That's very kind. Cheers, Max. I know Max. Yeah, to be honest, I don't eat cornflakes in the morning, so maybe that's the secret. Toast and Bovril. Maybe there you go. I think I've answered it earlier.
Fair enough. From Ryan Sanders. For real, how are you so good?
Oh, I can't. That's awkward. Thank you. I really appreciate it. It's very, very nice.
Compliment, isn't
yeah,
it?
it's a very nice compliment.
Yeah,
Thank you.
good
That's
on
very
you.
nice. I don't agree completely, but half.
From Eric John. All right, this is going to be half a story. If one train left London at 12:45 p.m., traveling at 65 miles per hour, and the second train came from Scotland at the same time, but only traveling at 2/3 of its maximum speed, how do you get your mixes so loud and detailed? Let's segue.
Okay. All right. That's easier. So loud and detailed. To be honest, recently I've been using. I've been getting actually a bit of help with my masters. I've been employing the talents of Rob Weaver over,
cool.
obviously this side, Sydney-based Weaver. His masters are just. I've said on Facebook many times, they're so good. I can send him a pre-master, and he manages to get his master about 4 lufs louder than mine. No distortion. The melodies just pop out of the mix.
Really
I
clean.
can't recommend him enough. I've always said to Rob, whenever I can give him a plug, I'll give him a plug. So Rob, here's your plug.
Sweet. And on that note, do you think that mastering is something that you should get checked by someone else, or?
You know what? Before I used Rob, I would have just said, no, if you can manage it yourself, then yeah. But I mean, if you can get an extra 5% out of your track, then why wouldn't you?
Yeah,
I guess.
yeah,
I mean, it
fair
comes
enough.
down to cost and whether you can afford to invest that in each track. But I mean, don't get me wrong, 99% of it's done in the mix down stage. But if you can save an extra 5% of brilliance in a track from getting an amazing master done, why not?
Does the mastering engineer, or does Weaver in this case, give you a bit of feedback, or
Yes.
is it just like, okay, I've sent it to you for mastering, just master?
Yeah, no, there's been many a times when I've sent him a track and he said, hey, your main leads, actually, have you checked the phasing on it? You got lots of anti-phase on it, and just things I wouldn't have necessarily checked and sounded okay to me. Also, as I'm sure you can attest to, being a producer, when you sit there in front of the same project for sometimes weeks, months at a time, you can be so close to the project that you lose sight of some things and you don't see certain things. You forget to check some of the obvious stuff that a master engineer was going to just hear straight away.
That's it, yeah.
Maybe, something's wrong with the vocal or something, but you've just got so used to something that it just sits fine in your ears. So,
Exactly, yeah. Just hearing it maybe that many times, it just gets stuck
That's
in our
it.
head, and we're just like, okay, that's what it sounds like.
I think that's actually a hugely important part of being a master engineer, is being able to come back to the client, and me in this case, and be able to say, look, have a look at this, have a look at this. I think it's someone that's just going to master it blind and just get the job done. I don't think they're really doing a full job. So again, it's about taking on critique and, not being too proud to change something because someone's identified something that you maybe haven't.
Yeah, that's really good advice.
Yeah.
On to the next question from Kayla Jade. What was your biggest influence that got you into producing and DJing, and how old were you?
Well, I mean, we covered some of that earlier, didn't we? But I'd say my biggest influence probably overall was Ferry Corsten back in the day. His early trance stuff was just I guess that was the genesis of what I wanted my sound to be, really. It was his hugely uplifting, beautiful melodies. I just translated that into something a little bit tougher. So, he's always, I mean, even now still, I look back on that early stuff and can still get inspired by it. So, yeah, I'd say Ferry Corsten back in the day.
So you got into producing first, is that correct?
Before
DJing, sorry.
Yes, yeah. I only got into DJing or began DJing because it became a necessity. My tracks started being played in London clubs, and there was a bit of a buzz on my name in the early 2000s or around 2003 kind of time. And I remember I was getting gig requests or offers in for all these fantastic places.
Oh, that's awesome.
I was having to turn them down because I couldn't DJ. So it was one day I was just like, you know what? I've got to get on this. And,
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I remember my first few gigs. My God, I'm so glad I don't have recordings of them because it must have been a train wreck. Because I think I pretty much learned a lot of the time on the job. So the first year was just learning in front of a crowd, essentially. But it was a good way to learn.
Cool. And how old were you when you got into DJing?
My first gig was when I was 16, and it was in Finland. Funnily enough, I flew to Finland for my first ever gig.
Oh, wow,
which
that's
was
awesome.
really cool. Yeah, it was cool. But as I say, I'm sure it sounded awful.
That's right. So about 3 years after you started producing?
Yeah, it was about then. Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. Next question from Rio. Rio Lacroix? I'm not going to try. I'm sorry, Rio. What's one track that you never expected to get as popular as it did? And conversely, what's one track that you were proud of that you feel didn't get enough attention?
So the track that blew up that I didn't expect to, most recently, has been a track that I did for some Norwegian clients. A lot of people here wouldn't be familiar with it, but there's a big tradition in Norway called Russ, and it's essentially when high school students finish school and they go on these like month-long parties. They break off into groups. They name their groups or their teams, I guess, and they hire these big party buses. They decorate the buses with their logo.
Wow.
They commission theme songs to be made by their favourite producers.
Wow.
And I've done quite a few of these tracks for these Russ crews every year. And one of the first ones I've done was for a Russ group called Draugen. And I put this track out. In fact, I remember now that they wanted it to go onto Spotify after I'd finished it. And at the time, we had a bit of a break in OneSeventy's releases. So I said to James, hey, do you mind if I just put this track out on OneSeventy? He said, yeah, that's fine, no worries. So just released it. I remember we didn't even do any artwork for it. The artwork's just the OneSeventy logo. Anyway, now it's I think it's on 1.5 million streams on Spotify. It's my second most streamed track ever.
Oh,
and it just blew up. I have no idea why, what people took to. It was just something I made for these kids as a job. And I've never ever played it out. It's just blown up and I can't explain it.
Right, so it must have gone viral there. They really love it.
I think it was a quite popular track over there in the Rust scene. So and it got me a lot more work actually for doing stuff like that.
Dude.
So that was unexpected. And I guess the track that didn't blow up that I wanted it to or expected it to more recently is a track I'd done called Stay Forever. I got a music video done for it, everything, 3 different versions of it, released it, and it was like a fart in the wind. I literally had, it was super low streaming numbers. It just didn't pick up. I don't know what it is. And it's still, to this day, one of my favourite tracks I've ever made. And I don't know why just people didn't take to it. We've recently just had a new remix done by Max Wolf, and that one's done a little bit better. But yes, it's my proudest work, and no one's bloody listened to it. So listen to it. Check it out. It's called Stay Forever.
Cool. And were you like, when you were writing this track or close to releasing it, were you like really sure? You're like, yeah, like this is the one?
Yeah, it took about 3 months on and off. And I worked with a vocalist called Vicky Fee. She'd actually, she's quite well known in the hardcore or happy hardcore scene from years ago, but she'd actually stopped doing vocals for Happy Hard. And I always wanted to work with her, and I sent her the instrumental. She said, I love it. I've got something in mind to write to write for it. So she sent me an early demo and just fell in love, just captivated me straight away. So that was at that point I thought, I think this could be huge. And actually, I'm not going to lie, I sent it to Monster Cat, and they expressed very early interest in signing it. But the line went cold, and 8 months later I was still waiting to hear back from him. So I took the track back and I thought I'm going to put it out myself, and then just nothing happened with it. Just unfortunately not a lot of people listened to it, but maybe Monster Cat could have given it a different life. I don't know, but who knows?
Guess that's life sometimes.
That's life, exactly right.
Go of those tracks.
That's it. Well, I mean, it's still something I love. I'm still very proud of it, and I'm still going to push it when possible. Maybe I need to do a new version of it. Keep pushing it until eventually they listen to it.
Fair enough. No, that's a good idea. Cool. This next question comes from Klim Mikhailov. How much time, daily, weekly, all the way back to 2005, did you invest in your music production skills to reach the music quality that you currently possess?
Oh, wow. Could you imagine if you had a timer, a Steam counter, telling you how many hours you'd spent? That'd be crazy. I mean, a lot. It's been my full-time job since I've been 18.
Yeah, have you always been like a daily, like every day you hop on, or like maybe 1 or 2 days a week?
I'm always doing something every day, whether it's with a client or something for myself. Awesome. It's a frightening amount of time, I'd imagine. Probably a good portion of my life, really, I'd say.
1,000 hours, who knows?
Oh, more than that. More than
a million?
I've nearly got that on Rocket League.
Yeah, right. That's cool you play Rocket League.
Oh, man, it's my favourite game.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. A lot of time. I mean, you can get good at music and, you don't need to spend anywhere near that amount of time, but it's my job. It would be the same for asking anyone, I guess, how long have you spent doing your main source of income. I guess it would be a frightening hour count stacked to that.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. Next question from Victor. How are you dealing with a lack of creativity if you ever go through that during a writing process?
It used to happen a lot, but it hasn't happened for a while, actually. I've been quite fortunate. I guess having a few projects at once to work on kind of helps. I mean, I don't like to have too many active projects going at once. I find it can be a bit overwhelming looking at 10 potential half-finished projects. I find that actually makes me more unproductive. But having 3 or 4 on the go is good, because if you get stuck on one, you can just open another one. And usually, if you've left it a few weeks, there's something you can add to it. I guess just trying not to put too much pressure on yourself to have to come up with something. Also, I find when there's pressure on, I find I seem to work.
You try to like force it, hey?
Yeah, if I've got a deadline, I don't really work hugely well to that. So, maybe just try and relax a touch.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the...
And you find that being diverse and working with other genres and styles, does that help you creatively as well?
Hugely. I find if I've had a big stint doing happy hard for like a month, and then I get a client in and we're doing some prog house or something, it is an absolute breath of fresh air. It really is. Same with anything. If you do something, the same thing for too long, too much of a good thing is always bad. So
true, yeah, so true. Now, this next question, I know you answered it on Facebook, but for everyone listening, is your remix of Party Don't Stop ever going to be released? And that was from Ryan.
It's the Monster Cat drama again.
Yeah.
Listen, I did that remix about a year ago. I kind of did it initially. Well, I had the idea in my head of what I wanted to do with that track. Party Don't Stop is a huge, huge track, but I always wondered what it would sound like with a great big melody in it. The melody came to me when I was making dinner one night, but it wasn't obviously initially thought of for that track. It just happened that when I put the Party Don't Stop vocal over the top, it just worked with it. And I'm not going to lie, I did the remix as a bit of a tactical remix, because I just had obviously this whole thing where the Monster Cat thing had fallen through with this Stay Forever track. I thought, how can I get on their radar? Why don't I try a remix of the biggest happy hard track on Monster Cat? Styles, Matt, Dougal. I'm obviously friends with the 3 of them. I knew it would be all cool to do it. So, I got to work on it. And they all 3 of them really, really like it. But again, I've just got a cold line with Monster Cat. They just haven't got back to me. So, listen, I want to get it out. I really want that remix to come out. I'm so proud of it. I'm super happy with it. It's just, I can't put it out on my own. I need their blessing to be able to do it. So, I've just told anyone that wants it out just to maybe send them a message rather than me.
Fair enough.
Because I can't do a lot about it. I mean, I can give it away as a free bootleg or a free download, but I kind of respect the original artists too much to just give something away like that. And also, I'm kind of too proud of that track to just give it away. It's kind of nice having a exclusive as well that only I've got for the meantime. If it can't have an official release, at least, if you come and see me play, you're going to hear it. So
exactly, something for people to look forward to.
That's it, exactly, because that's something you don't get very often anymore, is exclusives and DJ sets. People can always get hold of them somehow nowadays.
Very true.
Things. So I think I've only sent that to literally 2 or 3 people. So
good idea.
So if it gets leaked, I know who.
That's hilarious. You're right. Cool. This next question comes from Steph, or better known as Summer J. What is your biggest tip for new producers to improve their workflow and output for music?
Okay, so there's 2 things that I would definitely say is don't read into too much stuff that you read online. I think we were having this discussion earlier, me and you, weren't we? There is so much bad advice from other producers online, overthinking things, overanalyzing things, just trying to make things sound more complicated than they are. And I don't know whether it's for like a self-validation or something, but I find a lot of the time is an answer that could take 5 words, they'll take 100 words to explain it. And just sometimes there's a simpler way. So, I mean, hey, I'm not saying all this advice is bad, and it's great that there's so much advice out there, but don't read too much into it. If you find a simpler way to do something and it works, that's absolutely fine. And secondly, don't install too many plugins, because if you have too much options, you won't use any of it. I think if you have 2 or 3, so when you're starting out, 2 or 3 good tried and tested plugins, your Serum, a Silent, a Spire maybe. That's all you really need to make some good music. And I mean, you don't need to get thousands and thousands of things, because as I say, you just won't value any of them. You won't learn any of them, and you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, better off to maybe like make the most of what you got.
Absolutely.
Try and understand it, and then broaden.
I mean, that's certainly what I did years and years ago. I remember my early FL Studio 4 was just filled with thousands of cracked plugins, and because they're cracked and you haven't paid anything, you just don't care about them. But if you buy 1 or 2, that's all you need. And if you put money down on something, you're going to put the time in, because nobody wants to shell out $200 and not get their money's worth.
So true, so true. Coming up now to the last question. This one is from Daz. Bit of a funny question. Are you really the dance floor manager?
I didn't know I was even suggested to do that.
Didn't know it to begin with.
I guess not, if I've never heard anything about it, but why not? Why not?
Cool. Here's your answer, Daz. Now, what do you like to get up to in your spare time? Tell us a bit about you personally. Are you a gamer? Are you watching Netflix or anything at the moment?
Yeah, shock horror. I'm a massive nerd, like most producers. Yeah, I'm a big gamer.
What are you playing at the moment?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, Rocket League. It's football with cars, essentially.
Yeah.
I've been playing that since they very first gave it away as a free download on PS Plus. It was about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I remember since I've lived in Australia, it's been pretty much a once a night thing. So I'll jump on and have a couple of games online at least. So
we got to have a sesh one time. I'm not gonna lie. Every once in a while.
What rank are you?
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't play ranked.
Ah.
But what I was going to say is every once in a while, Ben Firelight comes over here.
Yeah.
And we'll just smash it for a few hours. So
I
maybe
didn't know Ben played as well.
Yeah. Maybe one day the three of us got to hop on one team.
Let's do it. Hey, I only live down the road. Let's do it.
That's it. Or maybe we can even have 3 producers versus 3 producers. Hey.
Oh, that'd be up.
That'd be entertaining to watch.
I'll be up for that.
Friendships put to the test.
Speaking of games, last night I actually just started Last of Us 2.
Wow, nice.
Put the first 2 hours in. I can tell it's going to be rather epic.
Yeah, big story, hey.
Yeah, it's supposed to be quite long as well.
So you're on PlayStation, aren't you?
On PS4, yeah.
Cool.
So the first 2 hours I spent on Last of Us. All I'm going to say is if the rest of the game is as detailed and beautiful and incredible as those first 2 hours have been, I can see why it's taken them the best part of 8 years to make.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Oh my God, it's it looks like it's gonna be worth the wait. So.
Cool. And are you playing anything else at the moment, or just those two for the most part?
Yeah, I'm playing lots of things. I bought it years ago and I spent about 2 hours with it on a flight and never actually gave it any more. But I picked it up last week and started playing it again from the start. And it's Metroid Return of Samus on the 3DS as well.
Nice. Cool.
I'm massively into my Nintendo. And
have you got a
stuff.
Switch?
Yeah,
Nintendo
I've got a
Switch?
Switch as well, yeah.
Love it.
So that's the thing. This is the thing with Rocket League across the platforms.
Yeah, cross-platform
I mean, they don't do a timer count on PS4. Thank God, or I'd probably depress me looking at it. But I mean, as I say, on Steam, I think I've got about 1,000 hours on there and about 500 on Switch, and PS4 is what I main on. So that's scary.
How cool is cross-platform, hey?
Oh, it's great. It's great.
Do you remember back, maybe 3-5 years ago when we were like, oh, if only I could just play with my friend on the PC or the guy on the Xbox. And now it's just, that's not an issue anymore.
Yeah. Although I have turned it off on Rocket League because I like to be able to speak on chat to my teammates, and you can't do that cross-platform. Man, we are going well geeky here. This is going to be interesting for about 2 people that are watching, me and you.
Yeah.
Moving swiftly out of the gaming anyway.
Yeah. A lot of people, I think the best thing about this pandemic, I mean, not that, a lot of good has come from it, but everyone's into gaming now. Well, I find it that a lot more people are into gaming.
I'll tell you one thing that's happened from it. A lot more people have bought Animal Crossing and got into it than I would have expected to. I think the pandemic
sold
has
out everywhere.
Yeah.
Hard to get a copy.
I've got friends in the UK and even myself, our understanding was that the type of people that play Animal Crossing end up becoming serial killers when they grow up. And then, anyway, we're all playing it now and loving it. So I don't know what that's saying for the future.
Yeah, because you look at it, it's just like animals. Everything is well and happy. So you got to know if a guy that comes out of the gym is playing that, he's got some psychological problems.
Massively. That's it.
We do manly things like Animal Crossing.
Well, when I first started playing Animal Crossing, my wife would be watching and be like, what are you doing? As a 34-year-old man, what are you doing? It's like she'd come downstairs and I'd be playing Animal Crossing and I'd switch to porn because it'd be easier to explain.
God, that's hilarious. It's better to explain. Yeah, it makes more sense. Yeah, right. Have you ever played... I don't know if you noticed, John Kutsky opens his Animal Crossing island every once in a while.
Yeah. I've not been to his island, actually.
Fair.
No,
Yeah.
Me and John have we've had the pleasure. We both went to Japan once on a tour together, and we were in art. I mean, obviously, Japan is just the mecca for anyone that's got any kind of interest in the geek related world. But I mean, me and him together, we nearly didn't make it to our gig that night because we were just spending our time in Akihabara, just in the arcades, going from one to the other. It was a pretty amazing time.
Awesome, dude. Cool. Moving away from games, are you watching anything at the moment on Netflix?
No, I don't watch a lot of telly, to be honest with you. When we put the kids to bed, and my wife will watch something on Netflix, and that's when I sneak off to the to the other living room with all the consoles, and I'll go and play some games. And that's the yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, we do watch stuff, but not currently watching anything at the moment. I've been recommended so many things to watch. Gangs of London's supposed to be really good, but quite brutal. So I don't think it's something we can watch with a 3-year-old around by the sounds of things. So this is the problem: is when you got kids, is you put them to bed and you get this small window of time, and it's like, when you're both working, you get about half an hour before you go to bed, and you can't even watch an episode of something in that time. So we'll watch it in 18 years when they've moved out.
Alrighty, well, wrapping up the show, tell us, do you have anything coming up towards the end of the year? Any EPs, albums, collabs?
Yeah, actually, I've just finished a collab with huge global superstar Ben Nicky. I've been fortunate enough to work on something with Ben, and we've just come up with a brand new UK hardcore track. I'm not actually sure right this moment which label it's destined for. I know we've got a couple in our sights, but that'll be dropping around about November time.
November.
So
cool.
yeah, it's called Never Knew. It's Ben Nicky featuring Ben Nicky X Technikal. It's all about the X's these days.
That's
isn't
it. Yeah.
No more verses. We're down with the kids.
That's right. The new cool thing to do. Hey.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, that's awesome. Anything else can we expect from you, from either Technical or Technikore?
Oh, there's a lot coming out this year still. I've made a point of trying to stagger the releases though, because I've never been too conscious about it before, and I would end up having something released one week and then within a few days something else. But I'm trying to leave a bit of space between releases now so that everything can get a little bit of time in in the spotlight. But yeah, it's a busy year, very busy. I think my busiest year yet. So just keep an eye on my Spotify, I guess. Every month there's going to be something new on there.
Awesome, dude. Well, thanks again for being on the show.
Man, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
No worries. And to everyone, make sure you do follow Technikal and Technikore on his Instagram, Facebook, all of his social media platforms. You won't be disappointed. You will enjoy the music. Thanks, man.
Cheers, man. Thank you so much for having me.